77 co-authors are added. Without objection, we'll take a voice vote on this measure. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Colleagues, I want to go briefly back to file item 27. I understand that AB 158 will be immediately transmitted to the Senate. And this time I'd like to go back to our guest introductions. I understand that we now have a number of guests with us in the room. I'd like to first recognize Mr. Gray. Mr. Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I rise today to recognize an outstanding young man from my district, Michael Thompson. He was nominated for the Ceres Chamber of Commerce 2014 Young Citizen of the Year Award. His community involvement is multifaceted, working with both the Ceres Women's Club as well as the Veterans of Foreign Wars. Education is just as important to Michael, as he is part of the Junior High Science Olympiad and continually makes the honor roll at his school. I am very proud to represent him and have him join us here today on the floor.
Press conference, was it?
At this time, I'd like to go to our next guest introduction with Mr. John Sawyer. Mr. John Sawyer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I am pleased to recognize three Los Angeles Department officers who are being honored by the Los Angeles Police Protective League for their outstanding work on the Skid Row Task Force. Skid Row arguably is one of the toughest beats you can walk in Los Angeles. Officer Dion Joseph is a 20-year veteran of the LAPD and has been a senior lead officer over Los Angeles' Skid Row since 2003. In this position, Officer Joseph created a high-visibility, community-based crime-finding tactic dubbed the sit-down technique to help deter drug dealers and users from selling and using narcotics near drug programs and shelters. Officer Andre Lanier has received 21 commendations for excellent police work during his time with the LAPD, and most of those were earned conducting footbeats in Skid Row. He also recently completed 36 hours of the most comprehensive mental health training available to patrol officers. Officer Delaney Hutchins has received 23 commendations for excellent police work during his time with the LAPD and has excelled as a community relations expert working footbeats in Skid Row. Prior to joining the LAPD in 2009, Officer Hutchins was a first sergeant in the Marine Corps, retiring after 20 years of service. These officers epitomize the dedication of peace officers throughout California who seek to provide the highest level of service and protection to their communities. Please join me and the Los Angeles delegation in the Assembly in recognizing LAPD officers Dion Joseph, Andre Lanier, Delano Hutchins for their outstanding service to the people of Los Angeles. Thank you.
behind court.
Thank you, colleagues. If I could ask folks if they could please take their seats, I'd like to go to our next guest introduction, Mr. Steinorth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I would like to ask the two classes, third grade classes from Foothill Country Day, if you would stand in the gallery. The parents and students from Claremont, California, have made their way all the way down here to learn about the state of California and our capital. I welcome you to Foothill Country Day.
Thank you, Mr. Steinorth. Let's go to our next guest introduction from Mr. McCarty. Mr. McCarty.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my pleasure to introduce in the back of the gallery here our recent elected city council member from the 3rd District in November, Jeff Harris, representing the areas of East Sacramento and South Natomas. He's a local small businessman, a contractor. I want to welcome him here to the Assembly chambers.
Okay, colleagues, why don't we now go back to the business on the daily file. I'd like to go back to file item 30, AB 29 by Assembly Member Campos. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 29 by Assembly Member Campos, an act relating to civil actions.
Ms. Campos, you may open.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the Assembly. I present to you AB 29 that closes a loophole in the civil law that allows for defendants to argue that a child can consent to sexual assault with an adult. A recent Los Angeles case involving a 14-year-old girl and a 28-year-old male teacher exposed the flaw in the civil law. The teacher was found criminally guilty of child molestation and sentenced to 3 years in prison. However, as part of the successful defense against the victim's civil lawsuit, the Los Angeles Unified School District argued that the girl had consented to have sex with the teacher. My bill closes this loophole and interpretation of how the bill should be, and it passed out of committee 10-0, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Colleagues, seeing and hearing no further action, Assembly Member Campos has asked for an aye vote. The clerk will open the roll. All those who vote who desire to vote. All those who vote who desire to vote. All those who vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the votes. The ayes 75, noes 0. The measure passes. Colleagues, for file item 31, AB 418, which is my item, we will pass and retain. File item 32, ACR 46, Mr. Calderon's item, we will pass and retain. Now if we could go to file item 33, AB 32, Assembly Member Waldron, the clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 32 by Assembly Member Waldron and others, an act relating to computer crimes.
Assembly Member Waldron, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I rise to present AB 32, which provides that computer crimes involving copying, distributing one or more digital images that displays an intimate body part of a person to be added to the statute of limitations so that the clock does not begin to run until the offense is discovered. AB 32 also increases misdemeanor fines for computer hacking and systems from the current $5,000 penalty up to $10,000. In 2013, as we know, Target found 40 million customers' accounts were hacked, releasing customer names, credit cards, and debit card information. In 2014, graphic poses surfaced of actress Jennifer Lawrence on Twitter. And this is an ongoing problem as we're in the digital age, and this is a clear violation of privacy. AB 32 passed the Public Safety Committee unanimously and is supported by the Los Angeles Deputy Sheriffs, the Los Angeles Police Protective League, the Riverside Sheriff's Association, the Association of Deputy District Attorneys, and the California Communities United Institute. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Seeing and hearing no further debate, Ms. Waldron has asked us for an aye vote. The clerk will open the roll. All those who vote, who desire to vote. All those who vote, who desire to vote. All those who vote, who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the votes. Ayes 77, nays 0. The measure passes. Colleagues, for the next several items, file item 34, AB 264, Mr. Jones Sawyer, we will pass and retain. File item 35, AB 277, Mr. Roger Hernandez, we will pass and retain. Now, if we could go to file item 36, AB 7, Mr. Bonta, the clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 7 by Assemblymember Bonta and others, an act relating to public schools.
Assemblymember Bonta, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Today I rise to present AB 7, which establishes October 25th as Larry Itliong Day in California and inaugurates it as a special day of significance within state law to honor and recognize Mr. Itliong's contributions to our state. As the first Filipino-American state legislator in the history of California, it's important to me that the story of the Filipino-American experience in California, a story that up to now has largely been untold, be told. One of the greatest leaders in Filipino-American and California history is Larry Itliong, a prominent labor organizer and farm worker who led a courageous and collaborative effort for socioeconomic and racial justice on behalf of farm workers and working people. Itliong was most notably a leader of the Delano Grape Strike of 1965, which I hope you will join me in celebrating this September for the 50th anniversary, which was a critical event in California history during which Itliong, a leader in the Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee, convinced Cesar Chavez, the leader at the time of the National Farm Workers Association, to come together in unity and go on strike to fight for workers' rights. This strike marked a turning point in the ultimate success of the farm worker labor movement. Larry Itliong is a role model for all Californians, and I respectfully submit that his life's work should be properly honored and recognized by establishing October 25th, his birthday, as Larry Itliong Day. I respectfully ask for your aye vote, members.
Thank you, Mr. Bonta. Mr. Williams.
Mr. Speaker, members, I rise in support of AB 7 to establish October 25th as Larry Itliong Day. The Filipino-American population is now the largest Asian American and Pacific Islander group in the state. As a group that continues to grow and contribute to today's society, it's important that we teach all of our state residents about their history and previous contributions to our state's success. I do want to disclose, of course, that there's a personal dimension to this too. The history of the farm worker movement among Filipinos is also part of my family history. My wife's grandfather was a farm worker in Kern County, Filipino farm worker, and experienced the labor organizing incidents of the previous century. As chair of the API Legislative Caucus and a co-author of AB 7, I feel it's imperative that the state of California ensures that our youth have a strong API role models to look up to as they grow to be future leaders of our state and nation. Respectfully ask for your aye vote.
I'd like to recognize Ms. Eggman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise also in support of AB 7, honoring Larry Itliong, who was a Stockton resident for a long time, and Stockton was the largest concentration of Filipinos outside of the Philippines in the early days. Larry was a true leader in the labor movement. They referred to him as Seven-Finger Larry. He had lost 3 fingers up in Alaska. Cigar chomping, married 6 times, a real organizer of the old days. And when people were trying to separate the Latino and the Filipino people by pitting them against one another. Larry was the one, after 30 years of organizing, members, this was not just a new thing. By this time, these were older Filipino men who had been organizing and working in the fields for decades, away from their families, picking our crops up and down the western coast, went to Cesar Chavez along with Dolores Huerta and said, we've got to come together in order to make true progress. So this is not just Filipino history, members. This is California history. This is American history. And this is only right that we should remember this great leader for who too long we have forgotten about. So I strongly urge the support for AB 7 as we remember and honor Larry Itlong and the work that was done in the Central Valley in the state of California to really move workers' rights forward in a way that was not able to ever be turned back.
Thank you. I'd like to recognize Mr. Gomez.
Members, I rise in support of this important bill. And I think he should get a day just for being married 6 times. Very impressed. But I also represent historic Filipino town in Los Angeles, and it's one of the largest concentrations of Filipinos everywhere, especially here in California. And I think it's just important to recognize our diverse leaders. Because when you're a kid growing up, you want to see people kind of like you so you can kind of recognize that you can live up to that same potential. And that's what we're doing with Larry Itlong, is having somebody that other kids can recognize and understand the role that he played in the farm worker movement amongst the Filipinos, but also to understand within the Latino community that it wasn't just Cesar Chavez or Dolores Huerta that got this done. It was a collaboration, a coordination amongst a lot of different individuals. So I'm proud to rise in support of this bill. And there's a beautiful mural in my district of all these historic Filipino leaders, and Larry Itlong is right up there. And I have no doubt that one day one of our colleagues might be up there as well as the first Filipino-American to represent a district in this chamber. So thank you so much, and I ask for your aye vote.
And I'd like to recognize Mr. Alejo.
Thank you, members and Mr. Speaker and members. I rise because often the history of the Filipino community has often been left out of our labor and our history books. And as the new generation of legislators, we have the opportunity to make a historic wrong into a right, and so that the younger generations of young Filipinos and Filipinas, Americans, when they look at their history books, they could recognize that they've had some great labor leaders and leaders in many other areas, whether it's education, healthcare, law, or business. The Filipino community has made some tremendous contributions. A few years ago, I was very proud to be an author of the official apology towards the Filipino community for state-involved actions during the 1930s against the Manongs. These were the Filipino workers who were coming, many as single men. They couldn't bring their wives, they couldn't bring anyone else with them, but they came to work in our fields and sometimes in our railroads throughout California. But they were mistreated, they were discriminated, and they were subject to violence and worse. In my hometown of Watsonville, it was the epicenter of the anti-Filipino riots during the 1930s, and then from there they spread to Salinas, to Stockton, to many other parts of California. But there had never been a recognition, an apology for what the state did during that time against Filipinos who were only coming here to work, to contribute, and make an honest living. So in that same line, when I look at this resolution, it's also about recognizing what has happened in the past. And the story of Larry Itlong was often left out when books were written about the farm worker rights movement. I was proud also 2 years ago to bring his son, John Itlong, who brought here to the Capitol the original flag of the AWOC, the Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee, that was held by his father, Larry Itlong. So I'm very proud to stand with my brother, Assemblymember Bonta, and it's time to do what's right and recognize Larry Itlong for the great leader that he was in California.
Seeing and hearing no further debate, Assemblymember Bonta, you may close.
Thank you, members. I'm very appreciative of your thoughtful and supportive comments. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Bonta is asking for an aye vote. The clerk will open the roll. All those who vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the votes. Ayes 72, noes 0. The measure passes. Let's now move to file item 37, AB 548, by Assemblymember Christina Garcia. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 548 by Assemblymember Christina Garcia, an act relating to estates and trusts.
Assemblymember Christina, you may open.
Good afternoon, members. In 2012, the legislature approved AB 1670, which amended probate code to remove the longstanding prohibition against non-resident heirs, beneficiaries being able to nominate persons they trusted who are California residents to administer the estate of relatives or friends who denied living in California. AB 548 would remove the sunset clause from the provision of probate code and would make the authority permanent. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Seeing and hearing no further debate, Ms. Garcia has asked for an aye vote. The clerk will open the roll. All those who vote, who desire to vote? All those vote, who desire to vote? All those vote, who desire to vote? The clerk will close the roll and tally the votes. Ayes 71, nays 0. The measure passes. Moving to file item 38, AB 637 by Assemblymember Campos, we will pass or retain. File item 39, AB 863 by Assemblymember Dodd, we will pass and retain. Moving to our consent calendar, does any member wish to remove any items from the consent calendar? Seeing and hearing none, the clerk will read the second-day consent calendar.
Assembly Bill 432 by Assemblymember Chang and others, an act relating to civil procedure.
Okay. The clerk will open the roll on the consent calendar. All those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the votes. Ayes 73, no 0. The consent calendar is adopted.
Assembly Bill 27.
Ayes 73, no 0.
Assembly Bill 139.
Ayes 73, no 0.
Assembly Bill 145.
Ayes 73, no 0.
Assembly Bill 293.
Ayes 73, no 0.
Assembly Joint Resolution 5.
Ayes 73, no 0.
And Senate Concurrent Resolution 13.
Ayes 73, no 0. Okay. I'd like to go back to guest introductions with Assemblymember Christina Garcia.
Members, with me today are members of the Caravana 43, Caravan 43. They are family members and fellow students of the 43 students that went missing in Iguala, Mexico. They are here to participate in a forum regarding human rights abuses. I encourage members to drop by and engage with them in the discussion and hear about their plight. They will be in room 4202 today until 1 p.m. Please welcome them to the California State Assembly.
And I'd like to move to our final guest introduction of the day by Mr. Linder.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. It's a real honor to be able to introduce the Classical Conversations group of Norco and Corona, if you mind standing. Classical Conversations of Norco and Corona is a homeschooling group located in Corona and Norco that brings homeschooling parents together to better foster an educational community, and the mission is to promote active hands-on learning. I mean, think about it. As parents, we are often busy enough, but imagine what it's like to not only carry on the job of a parent, but also of a full-time teacher. They're here in Sacramento specifically to learn about California, the gold rush, the legislature, and currently prompted their visit to historical sites such as the Capitol and surrounding sites. Not only are they focused on outstanding education, but they also promote community service and actively contribute to the Norco Rescue Mission. So thank you for coming to Sacramento, guys.
That concludes our guest introductions. Colleagues, I'd like to go back to motions and resolutions for a few additional re-referrals committee to committee. I'd like to recognize Mr. Holden.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pursuant to Assembly Rule 96, I request unanimous consent to re-refer the following bills to committee. Assembly Bill 1087 Grove from the Natural Resources Committee to the Transportation Committee only. AB 1405 grow from the Health Committee to the Human Services Committee and the Accountability and Administrative Review Committee.
Without objection, that request is granted.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Colleagues, we'll now move to our announcements and adjournments in memory. I'd like to ask if members could just take their seats. We have a number of requests to adjourn in memory from the following members. Let me first recognize Mr. Jones. You're recognized at your desk. You received prior permission to speak on this adjourn in memory.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. It is with great sadness that I ask the Assembly to adjourn today in the memory of William Bill Hollingsworth, who passed away on March 21st at the age of 87. A longtime resident of North San Diego County, Bill was a pioneer in many aspects for California water. Born in rural Colorado, Bill spent his early years living in a small cabin. The family later moved to Pomona, California during the Great Depression. He served his country in the U.S. Army as an MP, guarding General John R. Hodge, military governor of South Korea during World War II. While still a young man, Bill landed a job with Rainbow Water District, digging ditches and operating equipment, but quickly became the district's general manager. Bill is responsible for the development and founding of the Fallbrook Air Park, which was built and operated entirely on private investment until only recently. In 1969, Bill became the general manager of the Livenhain Municipal Water District, where he served for 21 years as the district grew from 800 customers to more than 48,000. Early on, he realized San Diego's need for more local water storage and set out in search of a location. His leadership and vision persuaded the Bureau of Land Management to grant the district more than 700 acres that are now the Livenhain Dam and Elfin Forest Recreation Area. The dam and resulting storage have helped to provide safe and reliable water supply for the thousands of customers in the district and are now an integral part of the San Diego County Water Authority's water system. While at Livenhain, Bill recognized the need for statewide coordination of special districts and served as the founder and first president of the California Special Districts Association, running it from his garage for several years. He began a successful effort with Speaker Unruh and the state treasurer to create participation certificates for special districts, enabling them to apply low-cost financing of projects. His work at the Special Districts Association is still recognized today in their annual Hollingsworth Award of Excellence. After his retirement from Livenhain, water and special districts from all over the state in need of reorganization sought Bill out for his position as interim general manager. He served on the San Diego County Water Authority Board, the County Grand Jury, and the Fallbrook Gem and Mineral Society. Bill leaves behind a legacy and a fulfilled vision in California's water and governance of special districts. But his most lasting professional legacy is found in the many people he led to whose careers began under his quiet demeanor and can-do spirit that are now serving in various leadership positions all over California. He is survived by his 3 children, 6 grandchildren, 3 great-grandchildren. Thank you, members, for joining me today in adjourning in Bill Hollingsworth's memory.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. I'd like to recognize our next set of colleagues for an adjournment in memory. Mr. Mullen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to honor one of San Mateo County's most dedicated public servants, retired District Attorney Keith Sorensen, who passed away on March 20th, 2015, at the age of 93. Mr. Sorensen left a legacy and standard of excellence that characterizes the San Mateo County District Attorney's Office to this day. Appointed district attorney in 1953 and serving for 29 years until 1982, Mr. Sorensen was renowned for his efforts to successfully clean up a corruption-tainted county at the time by investigating and prosecuting numerous cases involving bookmaking, prostitution, and gambling operations protected by law enforcement and other governmental officials. As Chief Deputy District Attorney, Mr. Sorensen played a major role in hiring and supervising Sandra Day O'Connor, a Stanford University School of Law graduate who later became the first woman ever appointed to the United States Supreme Court. In the early 1950s, it was unheard of for a woman to serve as a lawyer in a district attorney's office, but Mr. Sorensen saw her potential and helped launch her career. Mr. Sorensen also hired and trained both of his successors, Jim Fox and Steve Wagstaff, San Mateo County's current district attorney. After retirement, Mr. Sorensen remained active through community service and could be counted on to offer sage advice and guidance. We in San Mateo County are indebted to Mr. Sorensen for his service and his commitment to justice and integrity in all he did. He will indeed be missed, and I ask the Assembly adjourn in the memory of Keith Sorensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mullen. I'd also like to recognize Mr. Gordon for Mr. Keith Sorensen.
Thank you. Keith Sorensen was a friend of mine, someone who was perhaps one of the most ethical people I have ever met. His desire to make sure that the law was done in a manner that protected its purity was incredible. And he did do an incredible job of cleaning up the corruption that my colleague just mentioned. I would note that most of that corruption occurred in my colleague's district, not in mine. Mr. Sorensen also had a way of mentoring folks who were to become prosecutors and deputy district attorneys. As has been mentioned, he gave Sandra Day O'Connor her very first job out of law school. But he also had a tradition that if you were a successful junior prosecutor and you won a case, you got called into his office and immediately offered a glass of whiskey and a toast to cheer your victory. Keith Sorensen had an incredible spirit, someone who I will deeply miss, and I value his life of service to the county of San Mateo.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. Our final adjourned memory will be offered by Assemblymember Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I rise today to ask that we adjourn in the memory of Florence Wheeler, one of the greatest generation, a longtime Healdsburg High School teacher and member of the Women's Air Force Service Pilots, WASPs, during World War II. She was born in April 6, 1922, and died just shy of her 93rd birthday. She was married to Bill Emig, a former Santa Clara County sheriff, and Leora, a housewife who fed the homeless and poor during the Great Depression. In the early 40s, as a student at San Jose State University, she began her lifelong love of flying. And from there, she began her aviation career as a flight instructor and started her military training to enable her to be a member of the WASP. Florence was one of 1,074 women who became military-trained pilots who moved aircraft around the country and around the world in non-combat situations. After she completed her wartime services, Florence continued her aviation career as a flight instructor at Reed Hillview Airport, and she passed on her love of flying to her father, who got his pilot's license at the age of 74. In 1956, she married her husband, Marshall Wheeler, and had 2 children, Keith and Paula. While raising her family, Florence taught home economics in Healdsburg High School, my hometown, for 30 years and continued to be active in the Sonoma County Flying Club. In 2010, she traveled to Washington, D.C., where she was awarded the Congressional Gold Medal at the World War II WASP ceremony. The novel She Flew Bombers is loosely based on Florence's life. My sincere thoughts are prayers are with her husband and her 2 children, and I ask that we adjourn in her memory today. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Members, please bring your names to the desk to be printed in the journal. All requests to adjourn in memory will be deemed read and printed in the journal. Let's move now to announcements. I have a couple of announcements. First of all, I do understand that we have a dentist in the house who is celebrating a birthday tomorrow. Assemblyman and Dr. Jim Wood, happy birthday. And with that, the session schedule is as follows. Tomorrow, Friday, April the 10th, no floor session, no check-in session. Monday, April the 13th, floor session at noon. All other items remaining will be passed and retained. All motions will be continued. Seeing and hearing no further business, I'm ready to entertain a motion to adjourn. Ms. Garcia moves. Ms. Olson seconds that this House stand adjourned until Monday, April the 13th at noon. Quorum call is lifted.
Perfect.